This is going to be a lot of fun tonight, folks. We've got guest Kevin Hogan, author of over 20 books and counting, best known for his international selling book, The Psychology of Persuasion, How to Persuade Others to Your Way of Thinking. In the past decade, he has become the body language expert for ABC, Fox, the BBC, the New York Times, the New York Post, and dozens of popular magazines like Forbes, Investors, Business Daily, InTouch. Also, becoming the go-to resource for analyzing key White House figures, Hogan has taught persuasion and influence at the University of St. Thomas Management Center and is a frequent media guest. Articles by and about him have appeared in Success, Redbook, Office Pro, Selling Power, Cosmopolitan, Maxim, Playboy, and numerous other publications. A dynamic, well-known international public speaker, consultant, and corporate trainer, he has trained persuasion, sales, and marketing skills to leaders in the government, employees from Boeing, Microsoft, Starbucks, Cargill, Pillsbury, 3M. The list goes on and on. He recently spoke to the Inner Circle and at the $1 Million Roundtable convention in Las Vegas. His keynote seminars and workshops help companies sell, market, and communicate more effectively. His cutting-edge research into the mind and keen understanding of consumer behavior is unique and is surely going to bring a bounty, a treasure trove of information tonight, folks. If you're in sales, coaching, customer service, if you just have to deal with people in general, the stuff we're going to talk about tonight is going to help you a lot. Some of this stuff people do naturally, but when you really learn how to harness these tools and modules that we're going to discuss, you're going to feel like a mental Jedi. So be prepared, folks. You might listen to this interview several times just to grasp the multiple concepts within this discussion. So this is going to be a real treat. Kevin.
Rex.
Hey, it's a real honor to speak with you. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I really appreciate you spending some time with us tonight. And I know you're a real busy guy, so thanks for coming on the show.
You bet. What's your? Do you also have a YouTube a page as well? A YouTube channel?
Yeah, a YouTube channel. You can type in Leak Project or Clandestine Time Lord. It'll come up under either of those. So, yeah.
Good deal. Okay, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going fantastic. Before we get started, I just want to let you know I first discovered your work approximately 11 years ago, 10, 11 years ago. A lot of people that I worked with really enjoyed it as well. So
you did some stuff on the Ancient Aliens. Does that strike a bell, or X-Files type stuff? Is that right?
Oh, yeah. So I've interviewed people that specialize in everything from working with NASA. I've talked to people that used to work with alphabet agencies. I've talked to people that are into some advanced technology, gotten into conspiracy theories. A lot of Ancient Alien stuff, too.
It's really interesting. That's always been a interesting subject. I don't know if I would use the word alien or not, or ancient, but it's a good way to categorize it. And the other thing is about 20 years ago, when I was teaching hypnosis at our school, we had a guy who had a very compelling experience as far as, the abduction concept. And I was very skeptical, and I said, I want to work with him. And we did some pretty intense hypnosis work, and it all came out legit. It was enough to turn me into a well-intentioned skeptic, as opposed to just being a skeptic.
Can you describe a little bit about the session?
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, it was more than a session. We had the guy come in for it was the third day of a training that we were doing, and we actually used almost the whole day doing regression back over and over. Basically, this experience happened up at the Canadian border, and what was most interesting about it was that when the way that I taught hypnotherapy was, we do almost always regression or parts work. And so the regression type work, we track in massive detail, almost like a lawyer will a case when he's in court. And so just writing down event by event, color by color, what color was this? Where were you at? What table is over there? What's that DNA molecule? Did you see that on television? I mean, we took all these paths down from his experience. And then when I went back and I did it over, it was about 2.5 hours each time we did it. It came out so close to identical. It was basically the same as, what it was like yesterday for you when you shoveled the driveway with snow or whatever. I mean, it was just that. It was that crystal clear. So whenever something like that happens, it's less likely to be a false memory as opposed to the truth. So it was pretty cool. It was a lot of fun, and I'll never forget that. That was a big, long day, and a fascinating experience. A good friend of mine at the time, his name was Craig Lang, who was in MUFON, MUFON, I believe it is. And
Yeah.
he brought the guy to me. He's the gentleman that brought the guy to me. And we had a lot of fun. We had about 27, 28 people in the room that day taking notes, like, and our goal was basically to show how, false memory gets involved in hypnosis, but I couldn't find any. And that's what was really interesting.
Did he describe the beans or the craft?
He did. This was 20 years ago. I'd have to go back into where did we write this up at? We wrote it up somewhere. Craig has it. Craig Lang's got it. Yeah, he described all that stuff, and I don't remember those kind of details. I just remember being awed by the whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Because we did several other things like that. We interviewed several people that had reported experiences like that, and none of them really held up. And of course, we're there to knock the person's belief structure, whatever. But this one, gosh. Oh, it's been so long. If I would have been thinking about this, I would have called Craig and asked him the guy's name. But if it becomes interesting to you, email me like at the end of a week, like on a Friday, and I'll drop Craig a note. And I'm sure he's got all the data still after all this time.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Now, you have so much expertise and knowledge as well as experience in different persuasion tactics and just getting people to do what you want them to in the right way. 7 magic phrases of persuasion is one of the videos you've got on your YouTube channel. You talk about that, and I'm really hoping we can pick your brain on several topics. But the first thing I'd like to get into, if we could, is invisible persuasion. It's such a powerful tool, persuasion is, and invisible. And when I hear that word, I'm thinking, okay, it's kind of a covert way of doing things. Could you describe that for us, please?
Yeah, sure. There's several aspects of sort of that invisible influence kind of a thing. The first is that there's stuff that's sitting in your living room or your office where you're at right now that changes your decisions all day long. So, for example, there might be a picture of yourself or a mirror in your office, for example. And we know that when people have a picture of themselves or a mirror, like a mirror that's facing them or something on the wall where they actually can catch their eye, that actually changes my behavior. It causes me to be more likely to be disciplined when I'm listening to my client talk to me, because I'm more self-aware of myself as well. So I'll actually listen to him more and pay more attention to my inner feelings. Those are really important things when it comes to influence. I'm a better influencer if I've got the mirror or a photograph of myself looking at myself as if I'm watching me. Similarly, if you have a mirror or happen to have something that's of significance to the other person facing them, like say that there was a mirror behind your desk and the person just happens to look up at themselves, they tend to be more honest. I mean, a lot more honest. People tend to tell you the truth, which can be really helpful, for example, in sales, relationships, with your wife, with your kids, with the kid down the street who put the rock in your window, but you want to know the truth. And when you're talking to people and they have a mirror that they have access to, whether it's, sitting right in front of them, for example, or whether it's off in the distance, if they can see themselves, the probability that they're going to lie or deceive is very, very small. And so these are the kind of things that go into invisible influence, because you wouldn't know that the mirror was there. You wouldn't know that the photograph of yourself was there. You don't even think about it. Like if I just had you close your eyes right now, look around your living room or your office, you would be able to pick out all the major things, but you would be surprised. There's probably 50 things that if you just catalog them as you walk around the room, you wouldn't have known that they were there. There's a paper clip that's on a file. There's a Post-it note. You can ask me about Post-it notes later on. I'll talk to you in detail about that. And these are all triggers for compliance or not on the other person's part. So utilizing cues, little triggers in the environment is really helpful. Another thing that's really cool, using the invisible influence idea, that things that people don't see or pay attention to is that all the time people are processing certain kinds of information. As they're listening to my voice right now, they're going to go, that's interesting, but I'm skeptical. So what might an example be? Well, if I were going to talk with you, I could say, it's really interesting that sometime in the last couple of days, you considered changing the way that you were going to earn money. And that's a really interesting thing. You've also been concerned about your appearance, your physical appearance in some way, and I'm not quite sure. And you also have pondered moving from your current residence in not too distant past, and those kind of things are influencing your current decision. Now, let me ask you a question. Do 2 of those 3 things sound like they could be true about you? For example, say that you've pondered just, in the last couple of weeks, that it might be interesting to have revenue coming in, income in some way in addition to what you're doing right now. Is that something that's crossed your mind at all?
Of course.
Okay, so these are common threads, and if you ever study cold reading or go to a professional psychic entertainer, in other words, somebody who's actually almost like a scientist magician, like Penn and Teller, or these guys who are really good, you can actually find that there's about 7 or 8 common themes that run through people's minds every single day, the things that they're concerned about and worried about. And the fact is that we know that by simple pacing, pacing being that if I see you cough and I cough, the probability that we're going to be in sync is greater. And there's actually a lot of truth to that too, by the way. It's pretty cool. But when you do it at a much more subtle level, on levels where people are thinking, and then you can replicate verbally what they're actually thinking about or have thought about recently, that's like Milton Erickson squared. I mean, it's really powerful stuff. So being able to mind read another person almost with the cold reading, the ability of a cold reader or almost like psychic phenomena, it makes for a very influential Kevin Hogan or Rex Bear.
Now, so like you said, most people have certain thoughts that they think about every day. And what would another one be?
People tend to think about they tend to think about their future, and they're concerned about aging. That's one of the real big things that we think about all the time. We're always constantly thinking about our age. Like if I'm really young, say that one of your listeners is 21 years old, and one of the things that the 21-year-old thinks about is now I'm totally free. I can do anything I want, and I have no idea what I'm going to do now. When your listener is 50 years old, he goes, geez, I've got 15 more years until I retire. When the person is 40, they have things that they're thinking about that are usually related to money. When somebody hits 53 in the United States of America, that's actually their peak earning year of their life. So you can almost predict it. So if I can paste those ideas and those thoughts in someone else's mind, talk about those are things they've already thought of. And as soon as I talk about something that you are interested in, familiar with, all of a sudden I become just a little more interesting and a little more valuable to you as a person. And that is very persuasive, because then if I say something, you're more likely to accept my suggestion, my offering, my proposal, my idea, my product.
Now, when you offer that suggestion or product, you wait for certain body language, certain triggers.
I'm really interested in that. That's probably the area that we've studied the most over the last 20 years. It's really cool, Rex, when two people are talking, whether it's a dating situation, or the husband is trying to convince the wife, or if I'm trying to persuade you to pick up the latest copy of Kevin Hogan's new book, what is it, Invisible Influence maybe now, whatever it is. As we're sitting and talking at dinner, there'll be sort of this awkward discomfort that the two people feel almost in any new setting. When even a husband and wife going into a new setting, if they're sitting opposite each other, it's a little awkward. But then all of a sudden, when one of them sort of leans in towards the other person, that is this really fascinating unconscious cue that says, I now feel safe. It's like a safety cue, because we're really communal humans are communal just like most animals are. And we really want to be closer to people. We want to feel comfortable when we're close to people. And as people come closer to you, or it's really interesting, Rex, when I go on the road and I do presentations, whether in the United States or abroad, people come up to me and they stand inches from nose to nose. It's very uncomfortable for me, but for these people, they've heard me on CD or DVD or seen me live, and so to me, I'm like an old friend. But to them, I'm like an old friend, but to me, they're just another person who I'm meeting right now. And so I like that 2-3 feet of space, but they want to be in that intimate space because they've been listening to me for 8-10 years, for example. So it's pretty neat. So anyway, so when somebody's leaning into you in a conversation, all of a sudden you can predict that they're now more comfortable with you. One thing you can predict for sure is they're not less comfortable with you if they're leaning into the conversation. And at that point, that's always a good clue or cue that you can now propose your idea. That is the time.
When their eyes light up, do you look for certain movements, like up and to the left or to the right? I know that you're getting into a little bit of more, I guess you could call it NLP tactics, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, let's just talk about that for a second. About 16 years ago, when I was at the University of Wisconsin, I got challenged. I was training NLP at the same time, and I was convinced that the upper left, up right, lower left, lower right, the kinesthetic, the visual, the auditory, focused. No, I was convinced that this is all exactly right, and I was so certain that I was seeing it in other people as I listened to them talk. And then I had a prof from Northwestern University in Chicago, Evanston. He contacted me and he said, "You know what?" He says, "You're dreaming. This is there's no way this is right." Well, it turned out we did a study at the University of Wisconsin and Minnesota, and out at Seattle, University of Washington, Seattle, and in all three places, we found that there was no correlation between where people look up as far as up and to the right, up and to the left, down, down. There was no correlation between the auditory, visual, or kinesthetic based upon those specific eye movements. So unfortunately, I actually had to make changes in books that said, we used to think that this is how it was, but it really doesn't work out that way in real life. It was more that Kevin was seeing what he was trained, what he thought he was seeing, as opposed to what was really going on. But there are some really cool things that happen with the eyes that are really valuable. We know that when people look off and to the right, we did find out all kinds of other stuff. So if somebody looks off and to the right, we know that person is much more, if they're a right-handed person, and this is where it can get complicated. So I'm always talking about right-handed people. If you're a right-handed person, you're looking off to the right, the person tends to report being calm, comfortable, relaxed. They tend to actually like people who are off to their right more than they do when people are off to their left. Right there, that's worth a gold mine if you're in sales. It's also worth a gold mine of information if you have a relationship, if you're married, if you've got a girlfriend or a boyfriend or somebody that you care about. Because when you're off and to their right, if you're sitting across from somebody straight on, that's not ideal. But if you're both a little bit to each other's right, so you and I are at the restaurant, I sat down first at the on the left-hand side of the booth, and I went all the way to the end, and you came and you sat in the middle. That's perfect for communication and trusting and creating trust. But when I look off to the left and I look at the person who you brought with, and that person sitting there against the corner of the booth, and I center myself, now as I look off into to the left, I start to feel things like anxious and nervous and fear. And I tend to dislike people more when they're off and to my left, and I tend to not trust them as much. So these are huge take-homes for the listener. You can sort of stash the NLP stuff that you learned 20 years ago. It didn't test out, but we still know that these positions and how they access in the brain, right and left at least, they actually have huge dramatic impact on whether the person's going to like you or not, whether they're going to say yes or not. And we don't really care whether they're thinking auditory, visual, kinesthetic. Usually the right left is enough to trigger emotions in the body all by itself, as long as it's consistently right. And one of the really cool things is when you're in an audience, like say that you're going to give a presentation before a group, it turns out, and I've done this, I did this at 3M, the big 3M corporation here in Minneapolis. We did a huge study with 3M where I had an audience, and it was in an amphitheater where there were 3 sections, and I stood stage center the entire time, and the people off to my right, and I was off to theirs as well, gave me a 9.8 score for the day, whereas the people on the other side of the amphitheater off to my left, they gave me a 9.2. So you're talking about almost what is that, like a
half point?
A 10, that's huge. And so when it comes to somebody saying, yes, we want to get Kevin Hogan in here to give him $50,000 to present to us versus no, it's a lot. Your probabilities of getting yes at 9.8 are really amazing. So the further people are off and to the right, the better it is. It's really cool. So there you go.
Yeah, appreciate you giving us that updated information, and that's quite fascinating about being to the right versus the left and the percentage scale there. That's incredible. Now, you also have this really cool formula to cause somebody's brain to want to buy something from somebody or to want to be with somebody. And I was hoping you could talk to us about that and explain how that works.
Well, there's actually a few different ones. So I'm not absolutely certain which one you might be referring to, the YouTube one, or there's a couple of different ones. But what I'll do is I'll give you just a general pattern or a basic process, if you will.
Perfect.
And here's what you can do. If your listener will write down the very first thing that you want to do when you're going to communicate with somebody, and you want them, say that they have an opinion about you and you want that opinion to change, you should be very careful to find out what kind of a person this is, first of all. So the very first thing you want to become aware about is what's their skepticism level. Are they very skeptical or are they open-minded? If they're skeptical, be very careful, because the first thing that you say is the first thing they're going to disagree with. So instead of you talking, it's always best to listen, ask questions, and instead of saying, so what is it that you think about this subject? Or what do you think, who do you think should be the next president? Kev, I think it should be Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump or whoever. So if I happen to know that you're skeptical about, say, Trump or Sanders, for example, instead, and I was trying to get you, let's say I'm trying to get you to vote for Bernie Sanders. He's a socialist, very interesting man, and totally not my background. Okay, so if you're trying to convince me, the first thing you do is, Kev, when you're looking for a candidate, what's important to you? Well, I like somebody who's honest. Okay, do you consider Bernie Sanders to be an honest guy? Actually, I do. I think he's very honest. And say, okay, so what else is important to you about, voting for a candidate for president? Well, I might say, I want somebody who's actually going to do something a little bit different than utilize the funds of the GOP and the DFL, and somebody who's actually going to do something when they're president that's not party related. Is that Bernie Sanders to you? Yeah, it is, and Kev, do you think, Bernie Sanders, he's very much concerned about climate change and things like that. What do you think? Is that possible? Well, I tell you what, I've looked at the charts, and sure enough, the last 20 years, the Earth is a little warmer than it was the previous 20 years. That doesn't give us a 1 million year graph, but it's certainly interesting for the last 40 years. So Kev, you're saying that Bernie Sanders could actually be an acceptable candidate for you, say, against Hillary Clinton. Well, the fact is I probably would vote for Cruz, but as I think about it, I've started to like Bernie Sanders because you've asked questions about specific beliefs and thinking processes that I have, and then correlating them to what you're selling to me. Okay, or what idea you have. And by doing that, and I'm a big skeptic, and I'm very skeptical of Bernie Sanders. I'm actually skeptical of all these guys. So instead of saying, hey, Kev, you should really vote for Bernie Sanders, at which point are you saying, are you kidding me? This guy's a socialist, wants to take all of my money, throw it in the government, and trust them to give me health care? No, I don't think so. But the way that you present it, if you present it the way that I did just a few minutes ago, that is enough to change a person's mind. And if you're in the moment at the voting booth, or if you're at the event, or if you're with the girl right there, or whatever the connection is, the person is likely to at least sign and agree that this could be a viable option. And we also know, by the way, that as soon as somebody puts their name to something, they sign their name to it, or they say it in public in front of a group of people, that it becomes consistent at that point. So this is one of the formulas that you have for change, and it's probably the coolest for people who are intelligent, for people who have very strong opinions and don't like to change, and they always like to be right, guys like me, and so if you're trying to get me to change, and I have very strong opinions, I think I'm typically right, I do a lot of research, this is how you get me to change, is by utilizing that question technique, and just take little pieces, bits and bits and bits, and then put enough together until I go, you know what, that Sanders character might be an okay option. He could actually do okay.
And you're really good at studying somebody's body language, and you can pick up kind of what they're thinking almost. So with the presidential elections that are going on right now, who do you think is standing above the rest?
That's a great question. And I know you're going to have this interview for 25 years probably on podcast here, but for right now, it is important that people are aware that when Donald Trump speaks, he basically is not telling lies or telling the truth. He's basically saying what he feels in the moment. That's the first thing that you get there. And when you look at somebody like Ted Cruz, he is representing his belief structure, but in a salesman's presentation. And when you look at somebody like Hillary Clinton, she is basically targeting a market, and she's trying to capture that 51. She actually didn't quite get it last night, I don't think. But she's trying to target that 52% of her market. And Bernie Sanders actually comes off as being the most honest. He's the person who doesn't have anything rehearsed. He doesn't claim to have the solutions to everything, but he actually has the most honest, the most cues that are given off as truth. And least rehearsed, which is always nice in a politician. That's another thing you like about the Trump-Sanders is that there's very little rehearsal here. These guys are basically shooting from the hip. Sanders is a little more intelligent as far as intellectual communication. Trump is certainly smarter in the business fashion, very charismatic. So those guys are much more interesting to watch than, say, Cruz or Rubio or Hillary from me. As far as who's telling the least amount of truth, it's probably Hillary Clinton. and it'll be very interesting. I think she'll probably get the nomination for president, and I'm hoping so because it'll provide a lot of excellent interviews for me, and I can't wait. So
Nice.
That's where we're going with that.
Well, and there's this, have you heard of a guy by the name of Darren Brown?
Oh, sure. Good mentalist over in England.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to watch this guy. He blows my mind with the way he can put people under this trance in a matter of seconds. He'll pay for jewelry with pieces of paper, and then he'll bring the jewelry back, obviously, just to get it on video. And he'll take people's wallets and cell phones, asking for directions. It's pretty awesome. But the reason I'm bringing him up is because I remember this one particular scene where he and his crew set up this background where they put things in certain places, and basically there's this fake homeless guy asking for money. And because of where everything was positioned, one person that walked past the fake homeless guy, or the actor, felt the need to give him his shoes. And then when they went back and look at what was set up, it had something to do with the subliminal background. And I was just like, wow, that's incredible. So is that real, man? Or do you think that's just Hollywood psychobabble?
Well, there's a little bit of both there. First of all, somebody like Darren Brown who's an excellent mentalist. He understands the idea of contextual cues. You and I were talking about contextual cues at the beginning of this call. We were mentioning that there's all kinds of stuff in your living room that is triggering how you decide and whether you're going to say yes or no to your wife, your roommate, or whoever. Same thing is true at the office. And so this is why people get into fights and arguments and things like that, is because of the cues that are sitting all around. And subliminal is not quite the right word. It's actually supraliminal. because in other words, it is visible to the human eye, but you're not really aware of it as you say drive by or walk by, or you're looking around your living room. So it's superliminal. The subliminal stuff, wow, there is so much research going on with this nowadays. It's called priming. And so we know way more now than we did 15 years ago and how powerful this is. So let's look at Darren Brown for a second. Brilliant mentalist. They do a lot of takes in order to capture a percentage of the people who are suggestible enough to, say, allow you to take their cell phone, or to make a behavior that's going to happen based on a cue as they drive, say, on a bus down a street or in a taxi cab down a street, and then make a decision based upon something. So there are cues that they set up. I've seen some of this done culturally. It's a lot easier to do in your office than it is on the streets of London, that's for sure. But yeah, there's some legitimacy to it. But to make good television, to make good YouTube videos, you can't use every single girl that you walk up to in the hotel and say, can I get? I mean, one of the things that Will Horton and I used to do when we were doing our trainings 20 years ago is we'd walk into Denny's. I remember this in Orlando, Florida. At the end of the night, whoever was the hostess that would bring up our order at the end of the night, and I would always ask for two 10s in exchange for my 5. And every single time, because we had been such good people, we were patients, we waited in line, and I think we had 5 or 6 nights that we did this in a row, where they were happy. The woman was happy as she laid her $5 bill that I gave her onto her cash register across the thing, and pulled out the 2 10s and gave them to me. One night the manager looked out and says, "You are giving that back to her, right?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So it really just comes down to the level of trust and comfort that people have with you. If they trust you and if they're comfortable with you, if you're giving off the cues that show that you're safe to the person, if you're keeping your distance until they want you to come into their space, until they're comfortable, and then it really comes down to just, are you speaking as if you and I are talking right now? Or are you raising the awareness that something strange is going on, at which point the person's not going to give you 2 10s for your $5 bill, which, by the way, is one of the seriously wonderful experiments that we did night after night. And it was consistently effective. We don't expect that to happen all the time, by the way. So what Darren Brown does is really neat. And he's really good at it on stage. And he's done a nice job on his YouTube videos. But don't think that the listener, without really understanding it, is going to get this 100% of the time. If they start to understand the idea of setting cues at the office, say, like that mirror. The mirror technique is a really cool technique. That's going to get people to move. That's almost as good as a Post-it note. People are going to start thinking about their decisions. They're going to make better decisions. They're more likely to pay attention to how they feel about something and how you feel about it. People are better behaved when that mirror is there. Very tough to get a person that's looking at themselves in a mirror to not trust you.
And the media, different outlets out there, are probably just have mastered the ability to get into the subconscious mind of people to sell their products or push their agendas. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, you're right on the nose. I mean, that's nowadays with my goodness. I mean, online, if you go and grab your email at Yahoo or Gmail, AOL, wherever you're going, I mean, there's going to be ads, unless you've stripped them out with your software that you've got. But the ads are selected just based upon everything that you've searched for. So when I go to Amazon and I'm looking for books, anybody looking over my shoulder when I go to Facebook 2 hours later and just check and see if I've got Facebook messages can tell precisely what I was shopping for, or something very, very similar to it. Can be very embarrassing too, as they look over your shoulder and see whatever is over there. But that's how it's working nowadays. And the utilization of social media, especially by really good advertisers, the people in the know who really understand this, it's effective, it works, and you're just going to see it for the rest of our lives. This is never going away. This is exactly how to advertise. It works, and people are making very good money with it.
Yeah, and everywhere you go now, you're plugged into something with the smartwatch, smartphone. People take their phones basically everywhere with them. So Google, I know, had a issue several years ago where they openly came out and admitted that they oftentimes will turn on the microphone on somebody's computer, laptop, or phone for marketing purposes so they can bring the right products to you. But I mean, that's a whole other issue and a whole other episode. But you're the 7 hypnotic language patterns for difficult people that you talk about. I think that's really important. Trying to get into somebody's head, or just to get somebody's attention that's really whatever you're having a tough time with them. Could you talk about that with us?
Sure. First of all, a hypnotic language pattern is really just a series of words or ideas that you're going to use to try to get past the critical factor or the critical thinking facility of the mind. And we all sort of have this BS detector that goes off in our brain all day long. And whenever we see an ad or somebody's trying to sell us something, we have a BS detector go off. And we prefer not to have it. We really do like to say yes to people. But But when people are skeptical, like our the professor at school, or your wife or your husband or your kids, the boss at the office, they're very skeptical, and they're very tough to deal with because they know your behavior. They've seen you lots of times, or they've seen someone that they think you represent. So if you're a salesperson and they've seen 100 salespeople, and if their experience with salespeople is that they're basically dealing with con artists or whatever, well, then you fall into that category. That's who you're identified with immediately, and you become a difficult person. So what do you do when you get that person? And the first thing you want to do is just be thinking of, it's not so much the words that you use in a hypnotic language pattern, but what you're trying to do is pace the experience the person's having, which is, as you decide, Rex, as to what you're going to do, what car you're going to buy here, whether you want the Honda Civic or you want the Honda Accord, you would probably be best to let me do all of the work in putting up the details and the specs for you. Or if I was, say, going to, let's say that I had a service company and I was doing lawns, or where I'm in Minnesota right now, we have a blizzard today. Kev, we looked at like the plow your driveway, and I know you've probably had a bad experience with other people, probably breaking things and stuff like that. Instead of you trying to fix stuff after it's done, if anything ever happens, like I noticed when I walked in the door, I will do all of the work for you. We will fix any problem that occurs, and we don't leave it to the homeowner, to you to actually do that. And I really love that phrase, I will do the work for you. We've tested it, and it works, whether it's in sales literature or in communication with office employees, things like that. Preferably, it's the subordinate using it with the manager. So in other words, boss, I'd really like to do this, and I'll take care of all the paperwork, and I'll do the whole thing. All I need is your approval. And that's the concept. And so, yeah, and by the way, that series of videos on hypnotic language patterns, there's about 30 specific ones that we've actually tested out. We used to do about 300 a year that we would test. Oh my gosh. And we found about 3 dozen that are actually effective, that work really well. That video at YouTube is quite a good one. The difficult people. So I will do the work for you. And another one is if you're communicating with your spouse, your wife, one of the things that people like to hear is a compliment about themselves as they see themselves in the mirror, except for the compliment has to be extreme. So for example, as the husband is, say the wife is mad at the husband. So he walks into the kitchen that morning and says, instead of say, hey, what's for breakfast this morning? Instead he says, hey, you are really beautiful. Not you look great today. See, there's a difference, right? You felt that, right? You look great today. Yesterday, not so great, but today you look okay. So the answer is that you are really beautiful. And just leave it, and then you be quiet. And when somebody says something like that, even if you're angry with them, even if you're frustrated and just like you're ready to just pounce on the person, it is not possible to be upset when somebody comments on the outward facade of who you are. That whatever you look like in the mirror, I don't know, 1 to 10, but whatever it is, when you say, hey, you are really gorgeous, and then just shut up, that takes a difficult person and just changes their thinking right there. It stops them. It disrupts exactly what they were thinking. It's impossible to get past that. And now you can present something gentle that you have. Say, hey, I'd like to make you breakfast this morning. I want to do the work for you. You go sit down. And now all of a sudden you've changed somebody who might have been ready to get into an argument, with you, and you've changed to getting compliance. The correlation at the office would be, say that the manager walks to the subordinate. The subordinate's one of his tough employees to deal with, but he's a good salesman. This happens a lot. Salesman's a real good salesman, and the manager hates him because he's a maverick. So this familiar? So the manager goes to the salesman's office, and the salesman doesn't like the manager at all and is ready to be resistant to the change in the products that are going to happen. And so the manager says to the salesman, says, you know what? You have really shown that you are probably the smartest person in this company, and we need you here. Tough to disagree with that. Tough to disagree when I say you're the smartest person, or you have shown genius, and I really appreciate it because I needed it so bad. And when you put yourself there now, I'm now set up for part 2, which is, that's why I want you to be the person who actually takes this product public first, or that writes the copy for this newsletter first, or that does the first article for our new magazine, or whatever the thing is. And so it's sort of a 2-step process. People that are difficult for you, and of course those same difficult people for you are easy for other people, but because of who that person sees you as, that makes you tougher to deal with for some people, easy with others. So not everybody's a difficult person. It's just difficult for specific people. After all, you get mad at your husband, wife, and kids, but you don't get mad at the husband, wife, and kids that live three doors down from you.
Right. And you're also good at getting people to tell you what they're looking for in a product or a service. And I was wondering if you could talk to us about how you do that the easiest, most efficient way.
Yeah, this is so important, and this is true too in relationships too. The This is an area where the old NLP values elicitation actually can be helpful if you're dealing with somebody who's making a rational decision. If the decision is impulsive and emotional, like you're walking in the convenience aisle and there's the Reese's peanut butter cup or the Kit Kat bar, it's like, what do you want in a Kit Kat bar? Nobody cares what they want in a Kit Kat bar. They're buying the Kit Kat bar. Okay, so this isn't that. But if you're coming to a decision-making process and you really want the person to say yes, and you want it to be based on rational thinking, which, by the way, almost everything that I sell or do business with or people that hire me, we really need it to be a rational sale. I need that person to be really mentally disciplined when I'm talking with them. So for me, it's real important. The emotion is still there. It's relevant. But so what matters most to you in what matters most to you in a podcast? I mean, do you want a podcast that's going to be controversial? Do you want a podcast that's, where like, do you like listening to Oliver North, who's just going to be out there on the right wing, or whoever, like, what is it that's really cool about this? Now, that's one way. Okay. And that works. But if that fails, if it doesn't match their reality, because when you ask, for example, when I wrote the book Irresistible Attraction, I asked this question to women. And I said, what is it that you really want in a man? And they would say, I want a nice man. And I said, well, that's cool. And then I would ask the next question, and I was interviewing people, and then we collected all this information for the book. So here's how it went. And then I said, what else do you want in a man? Oh, I like a man with a sense of humor. I love a man with a sense of humor. I love a man who can make me laugh. If he can make me laugh, he can have anything. And I said, wow, that's pretty cool. And this is consistent with almost all of the women I talked to. I was in Seattle when I did this set of interviews throughout the day, just talking to woman after woman after woman. And it was remarkable how similar it was. So kind, gentle, loving, compassionate, good father, makes me laugh. Those are the things. And I asked the women, now these were all women who were single at the time. And I said, as you think about the last man that you were with, now just get a good picture of him in your mind. Did he have these characteristics? No. Every single person, every single one of them. He was nothing like that. So what we want to buy and what we do buy are two different things. And that's why your question is so important. So if I just say, Rex, what's most important to you in a Honda Civic or a Honda Accord or in a Toyota Sequoia, you'll give me what you think is the rational thing. And if I'm going to help talk with you through this in an emotion at a rational level, this is the way to do it. But if it's about emotions, if it's about what you're really going to do, like if I can't get you rationally thinking, the best thing to do is say, hey, last time you bought a car that you liked, tell me what car it was and what you liked about it. And then I'm going to ask a question, which is the last time that you bought a car and you hated it, tell me about how you decided to do it and why did you hate it? And now I know precisely what the person actually has done. And behaviorally, people's behavior tends to be consistent over time. Their intentions are often consistent over time too. The woman still wants the gentle, loving, good father, makes me laugh. But that's not what she typically buys at the store. She typically buys the guy who had a bad temper, who was very irritating to be around, who didn't pick up after himself, but he was good looking or he had a good job or something like that. So we want to find out, are we looking for what people actually do or what they would like to do in a more ideal, rational world? So if you're out to a dinner with, you're single and you're going out to dinner and you're out to dinner with a lady, and how do you know if you're going to find a relationship that's good for you? You're like, how do you know? When you think back to all your relationships in the past, think of one that was good, it's like, what worked, and she'll say, and then she'll tell you a story. And this is true no matter what the product is, whether it's a man, a woman, or anything. People will tell you, if you get into the specifics, and if you want them to buy you, then you've got to be able to match what they're going to say. Basically, you have to be the mirror to that. And if you're not, by the way, if it would be not only inauthentic, but really foolish to try to be something that this woman wants or that this person wants to do business with if you can't fulfill that wish. You're just asking for disaster, no business in the future. The person's going to leave you in 6 months. I mean, it's a waste of time. But if you find out, it's like, hey, so what's really interesting to you? Like, what kind of books do you like to read? Oh, I like to read books on influence and persuasion, communication skills and sales. Oh, well, then so if you had a chance to go out with somebody like that, would Kevin Hogan be an interesting choice for you? Yeah, that would work pretty well. Okay, well, and there you are, But if she said, I don't like sales books, I don't like influence books, I don't like persuasion books, I can say, well, I've decided to quit writing them and go to just novels nowadays. There's no point. It's like, don't be inauthentic, because it's just going to kill you and it takes away your own credibility with yourself. So that's how you do it. You do just ask a couple of questions and you do find out quite quickly what a person's behavior was in the past and what they want to do in the future.
You've also met a lot of different people in different fields of work. Boeing or somebody that's working for 3M or something like that? I mean, do they have kind of the same interests and hobbies or?
Yeah, I've noticed that there's a lot of influence techniques that don't translate to other other languages or other cultures. And one of the big lessons for me 15 years ago was the first time I went to Poland, and I love going to Poland. We do a lot of business there and speak there fairly often. And my the very first time I went to Poland, we were teaching language patterns and meta programs, and it turned out that they didn't carry over into the Polish language or into their culture. And so what could have been an awesome experience had it been in America turned out to be terrible first day of a training because it just didn't carry over. And another thing that's really interesting is there's certain countries that don't have words there's no equivalents. So for example, the Psychology of Persuasion, when I first got that published, that was 20 years ago this year. When it first got published, it got translated into Poland quite early, and they wanted to put the word manipulacji in there, manipulation, because it made more sense than persuasion as it was used in Poland at that time. And I found out, for example, in Germany, and I don't know whether this is factual or not because I don't speak German, but I was talking to somebody about this just the other day, and he mentioned to me that there's no word in the German language for soul, which I thought was quite interesting, like, the depth of your soul. And so that was kind of cool. And sure enough, from culture to culture, people really are quite different in how they view things. When I go to the Netherlands, they will refer to the violent United States, for example. We are violent and we are constantly having gunfights. You would think that it's like the gunfight at the OK Corral every day where I live, and I would tell people, it's like, we're just like anywhere else. It's, you walk down the street, it's not that big a deal. Oh, but you guys have guns going off every day. And I'm like, I live in Minnesota. I own 7 guns myself. I don't know that I've ever shot one outside of I don't think I shouldn't say so on radio, that's for sure. No, off of a range I haven't. So, but the perceptions are very different. And here in Minnesota, everybody owns a gun. In Wisconsin, everybody owns a gun. In Illinois, nobody owns a gun. And so we see cultural differences. In Texas, everybody owns a gun and uses them. So it just depends on where you are, and there are differences, and understanding those cultural differences is really huge. When I speak in the South, when you go down to Huntsville or to Decatur or to Birmingham or to any of the southern red states, for example, it's a very different group of people than, say, Vermont, Washington, Minnesota. The liberal blue states tend to be very thinking, open-minded states. The red states tend to be very conscientious. They're the people who work hard, they get things done, they have strong beliefs, and if you're not like them, then you probably don't need to have that Southern hospitality. So yeah, there's huge differences. Be very in tune with where you're at and how people talk, and those things that are important in how you refer to them. You probably remember when you were a kid, you grew up and you said, "Hey, Mr. Johnson," and if you were to call him Bill, which is his first name, you might have gotten in trouble. But sometimes nowadays, it's like the best thing to do. So you kind of have to feel those things out and just pay attention for all those cues and see what people are comfortable with. That's a great question. Super important. People need to pay close attention. And when you travel, just because you're an American, that used to be great 30 years ago. Nowadays, it doesn't buy you half as much as it did in respect and appreciation.
It's unfortunate because my friend just got back from Europe and he said, "Man, I felt like I should tell everybody I'm Canadian so they wouldn't look at me like I was a rodeo cowboy." It's unfortunate, but the media certainly has portrayed that. And with the government going into Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and all that stuff, I mean, I can certainly see why other countries might think that, but the media is so skewed anyway that it's just really designed to stir people up, in my opinion, and get reactions out of the population. But
Oh no,
go
you're
ahead.
exactly. And your friend who went over there, I mean, being from Canada is looked at as a big positive. Just talking about Canada anywhere in Europe gets you points, as if you're intelligent. But if you say, "Yeah, I'm from the United States, I'm from Chicago," you almost have to apologize and show that you're not just an American and that you don't think you're better than everybody else, because everybody perceives you as being arrogant just the second you say you're from America in Europe. So again, this is with the question that you asked about, do people think differently? Man, I'm telling you, just because it's who you are, American, you must be arrogant and violent.
Right. Right, and you must have a supersized SUV and watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but actually a lot of the population is doing that now.
Yeah.
And also I think it's really important too, Kevin. So many people out there now are just creatures of their own habit. Procrastination, that's in their nature, and that's the way they're going to continue to be until the last minute and get things done. How would you help somebody get over that and be really persistent and quick on the ball?
Yeah, procrastination is probably the biggest problem that's out there for the individual. Takes a few steps. The procrastination is something that happens for several different reasons. One is that we're scared to do something. Another is that we just have so much personal resistance to doing it. You don't want to. Taxes. I hate paying the government money. I don't want to make it. There's a big part of me that says they don't deserve it. Why would I want to race and go do it? So as far as people procrastinating, cleaning the house and stuff, they always think maybe, deep down there's like, the husband, the wife, somebody else should be doing this instead of me. Why the heck am I doing it? And so we end up procrastinating our work. But anyway, to get to the solution's not necessarily finding the root problem in this case. Here, it's different. Here you have to go to get the person to have that mirror on their table again. People who have that just a little personal mirror on a table tend to do things to get up and actually go take action on something much quicker. There's an old NLP technique that we actually showed to be effective in solving procrastination. And what it was is the swish pattern. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No, I haven't.
It's a cool pattern, and it's really simple. And basically, you just take you just sit down and you think about the behavior that you're procrastinating. So for example, I'm sure I have something here at the house. Oh, I've got a 5,500 form I have to fill out for the IRS, and I don't want to do it. So a 5,500 is where all your retirement money is, and I don't believe the government has a right to have this information. So this is going to sit until April 17th probably. So if I wanted to really beat that, what I would do is I would sit there and imagine myself looking at the 5,500 sitting over there on the coffee table, and I'd go, you know what, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And then what I would do is I would just imagine looking at the 5,500 and imagine something that I really, really liked coming out of the 5,500. So maybe there is my son stands up and he's playing his guitar, or maybe my daughter is getting her PhD now, or maybe there's a beautiful girl that I really like or something. And all of a sudden I go over and I grab the paper because I just want to be closer to this image, to this something that I've just picked up. And I replicate this experience now from what I don't want to something that might be fun to have or cool to experience. And so by doing this perhaps 20, 30 times, what happens is you sort of lay down just a set of neural pathways, literally, that ties the procrastinated behavior to a behavior that you actually will cause you to pick up the disastrous thing that you don't want to do. It might be a pair of gloves. Like tonight, I've got to go shovel the snow just off the sidewalk. We got tons of snow tonight. I don't want to do this. I want to talk to Rex all night. That's what I'm hoping for. Let's make this interview long. I don't want to go outside. It's freezing out there. So, but really I have to do it. So the best thing for me to do is not say, go shovel the driveway, but go grab your gloves and coat. And that then leads you to the boots, which leads you to going to shovel the driveway. So it's really a step. It's really just getting that first step and going to do it. Procrastination is not easy to beat. It takes a lot of what's called self-regulation units. And that means that you're well rested. And the more that people have resisted stuff all day long, like resisted yelling at your kids, resisted yelling at the neighbor kids, resisted yelling at the boss at work. And every time you resist something, like you resisted temptation, you didn't eat chocolate cake today, you didn't have a cookie, you were on your diet, you were successful at it. As you do that, we lose our ability to have self-discipline. So as we get to the nighttime, we tend to procrastinate and do impulsive behaviors instead. We tend to eat tons of chocolate chip cookies at night. If it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you might as well just give up because nobody's there to watch you. That mirror is gone. And now you're actually going to do stuff. And you procrastinate all of the other behaviors. And instead you throw in a DVD, you play a video game, you go and watch Netflix, something like that. So the best thing to do is for people to do the behaviors they don't want to do in the morning and do them first. So that 5,500 that I got to fill out, I don't want to do that. But when I get over there and I'm looking at it, I'm going to do it at 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. It's going to be the first thing. Because if you put it off until the end of the day, you have no juice left in your self-regulation battery. There is a cheat for this, by the way, a hack. When you find yourself like you just don't want to do what you have to do, you can have just a little bit like a cookie, a chocolate chip cookie, or a couple of M&Ms, and this releases enough glucose into the body and into the brain that you actually, it's literally sugar turns into fuel in this case. As long as it's not too much, you're not diabetic and so on. This is really cool. It's a great hack. So just have a couple of M&Ms or like an Oreo cookie, and that's enough glucose in the body now in about 10, 15 minutes to where you'll actually have enough juice to do the thing that you've been procrastinating. And that's one of the reasons that Microsoft used to give all their people M&Ms and Coca-Cola on their desk all day. Built a lot of really heavy people and a lot of good products too.
Yeah, all that high fructose corn syrup's got to be good for them. I do like how you say that though, just little tiny amounts and you get enough juice to keep going. That's pretty cool. Now,
it's a little hack. It'll help your listeners for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that little hack. I like the way you put it too. That's neat. Now, there's different phrases that are used for persuasion. I mean, there's tons of them. But what are a few that you could give our listeners that are just like gems, that they could use for any type of atmosphere?
Um, there's several. Oh, wow. A lot of people will say, I can't make. I'm trying to think of a good situation where somebody would say, let's see, say somebody, I'm out I go to Vegas a lot and I present in Vegas a lot. And a lot of times I'll go to a nightclub afterwards and people will say, hey, do you want to, and then pick an illegal drug. And there's a lot of them there. Instead of saying I can't do that, which can be overcome with persuasion and words, instead, you're more persuasive when you say, I don't do that. And it's an identity issue. So instead of the person hearing that you can't do it, at which point they, of course, can say, well, yes, you can. Right? I mean, because you can do that. It comes off clear when you say, I don't do that. In other words, it's a 0% chance. It's not part of who I am.
Now,
so that's
and let me just jump
ahead.
in real quick if I can, because I've heard in the past with hypnosis, when you say things like can't, won't, don't, shouldn't, couldn't, wouldn't, the subconscious mind doesn't really pick it up. The conscious mind has to reverse what you're saying and basically dissect it and bring it back. Is that true?
That's absolutely true. And it seems counterintuitive with what we just said. But let's go back real quick because I'll come back to this because this is a great one. Because one of my favorite language patterns of all time is don't feel obligated. But remind me of that, and I'll come back
Sure.
to it in a second. But I do want to go to the don't can't, because when you're trying to promote who you are to a group of people, your copy, your podcast, or on your YouTube videos, you want people to know that you don't do certain things. Like, I don't vote Democrat. That just never happens. All right. I will vote Libertarian. I might vote Independent. I will vote Constitutionalist. Okay. But I don't vote Democrat. I have voted Republican twice in the last 30 years. I voted for Ronald Reagan. Probably was a mistake. Otherwise, I vote for Independent.
Right on what you just said about voting Independent and Constitutionalist. I applaud you for that.
People need to just, well, anyway, yeah, I could go forever on that one too, but that's not my area of expertise. Those are just beliefs and feelings. So I don't vote Democrat. That's a fact. Even though I'm socially liberal, I don't vote Democrat because you've got to learn how to add. So the thing is I can't vote Democrat means you can try to change my mind, but I don't vote Democrat just means that's who I am as a person, and you're not going to try to change me. But let's say that, let's now change the context. Let's say that I want you to listen to my idea about, say, Ron Paul, for example. Do you know who Ron Paul is?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Okay, real smart guy. He's about 70 years old, ran for president 4 years ago and 8 years ago. Really wonderful guy. And he's a libertarian thinking kind of a person. He calls himself a Republican. He's not. He's libertarian. And let's say that I wanted you to vote for Ron Paul, and this would have been 4 years ago. And you'd say, well, no, Kev, if you vote for Ron Paul, you're basically giving Barack Obama a free vote. This, by the way, is true. But let's say that I need to give you my side of the perspective, which is I do want you to vote for Ron Paul, because if we don't vote for better candidates, we're never going to have a better candidate. We'll always have the same garbage we've had in the past. So I would say, look, Rex, here's the deal. I don't want you to feel obligated to vote for Ron Paul. I don't want you to feel obligated to vote for a libertarian or a constitutionalist or an independent. I just would like you to consider it as you hold, I know you want to vote for probably Cruz or Rubio in this election. I can appreciate that. But I'd like you to consider somebody like a Ron Paul, or maybe even, any of whoever the libertarian candidate will be in the election. I can't even think of who it's going to be this time around. My old buddy Wayne Root, he did it. He ran one time. But whoever it is, doesn't matter. I'd say I don't feel obligated to vote for him. I just want you to consider some of the things that they stand for. And then I'm going to ask you the question, is it better to do the right thing or to do the wrong thing? And then you just tell me. Okay. And then I'll say, don't feel obligated, because that don't really, it almost gets processed as do. It's pretty consistently effective across languages too. When you ask people to do this in Poland, or in, for example, the Netherlands, as I'm thinking about that too, in Dutch, this works in other languages too. Don't feel obligated really is a very cool phrase. It is absolutely hypnotic in that it bypasses critical thinking. It's almost as good as imagine. When I ask somebody to imagine something, it's that strong. It's very, very strong.
Yeah, and saying imagine something, when is the best time to use that word? Because that is a power word.
Yeah, it is. Great question. Imagine, Cialdini did a study that was so amazing about 30 years ago, Robert Cialdini, that he doesn't even talk about it because it's so scary. It's this good. And the study was real simple. This was when cable TV was coming into existence in Tucson, and he had some of his graduate students making phone calls and calling residents in Tucson saying, hey, we have this thing called cable television where you're going to have 75 channels and you'll be able to watch anything you want. And now the graduate student did not work for the cable company at the time, but they were keeping information for the cable company that was coming in town. So anyway, so that was the first set. They would say, hey, consider, getting cable, because this is going to be really cool. Now, this is 9 months before cable came into town. 9 months. And then the same graduate student, the same girl, would call an equal number of other people, and then she would say the exact same presentation that she said to the last person, except for the very first thing was, hi, my name is Gretchen, and I'm with the University of Arizona, and I'm calling about cable television. I just want you to imagine for a second that you had a chance to actually, and then she would go into her presentation right there. Now, here's what's amazing and why Cialdini doesn't talk about this to this day. 3 times as many people 9 months later, 3 times as many people bought cable television from the provider if they had been told imagine over just the regular conversation. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't remember any phone call I had 9 months ago. I don't remember any words I said on the phone, and I sure don't remember what somebody said to me on the telephone. But it was so strong. Imagine almost like opens the door to the mind, puts you inside, and gives you free reign. It's that strong. So early on, if I can say, Rex, just imagine that we actually did have a libertarian candidate that actually made it. Could you imagine that? You'd actually have people who want to work for a living, not going to war. We'd have free people everywhere. The taxes would be a fifth of what they are. People would be able to earn what they want, keep what they want. And if they want to do something special for the next door neighbor, they can. And if they don't want to, they don't have to. If you want to have smoke pot, go for it. But don't drive in my driveway with it. That's what is interesting to me. So imagine early on, right at the beginning of whatever you're going to say, just imagine this scenario. And that's exactly where you want to begin. It is like that. Imagine it's potent. It's made lots of advertisers, lots of money. I've done real well with it. And to this day, people know when I write advertising copy for new products, books, I just use the word imagine. I also put don't feel obligated to buy this in it. And they know it. It's almost like a joke. It's almost in a positive way. It's humorous because they know precisely what I'm doing, which, by the way, goes to, is it okay if people know you're trying to persuade them? You bet it is. It's fine. And so when you say, hey, just imagine that you went to the Kevin Hogan channel on YouTube, and see if you subscribed and what would happen if you actually watch the videos there and how that might change your life and get you to some of the things you want in life. That's cool to do that, and especially if it matches your being authentic. Imagine is powerful. I can't think of anything. Maybe because is more powerful than imagine. That might be the only other one. But imagine and don't feel obligated. Those two things change minds fast.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Imagine. I'm going to use that word more often because it really does get the individual to think about what they want to. That's incredible. I like it a lot. Now, there's different types of subliminal programs that someone can purchase and download on their computer for $5 or $10, and they can put in a bunch of words, and that subliminal word that word will flash on the screen for 0.01 seconds or half a second or whatever in different colors, and you can put different pictures behind it also. Now, I'm sure with all the research that you've done, you've been able to find out if that stuff really works. Does it?
Yeah, it does. Well, that's what you just described actually just is the only kind of subliminal messaging or priming that actually does work. We found that single words and photographs of attractive women, those two things will create compliance for whatever you're going to show. So, for example, to use what you just said, which is actually ideal. If you're looking at your computer screen, it's very easy for an advertiser to say, flash the word. For example, say that there's an advertiser. Let's just say it's Coca-Cola. Okay, and we know this for a fact now. We've seen this, that when Coca-Cola is flashed, just the logo is flashed consistently. The person grabs a Coca-Cola at the back of the room when they go out of the testing room. So we know that works. And that's so in other words, the person had no idea that they could choose a Coca-Cola, water, or a Pepsi at the beginning. They're playing a video game for 5 minutes. They leave and they're offered one of the beverages, and they do pick Coca-Cola as they walk out. That's cool. And we also know that the attractive face of a female is something that's going to cause compliance. We also know that when we show images of like a shark or that's probably the first thing that comes to my mind. There's several others. There's a lot of stereotypical biases that don't happen consciously, that happen non-consciously. If I show you a picture of a Caucasian woman, that's going to cause people to buy. If I show people a picture of an African-American man, on the other hand, but they don't know it, it causes their heart to accelerate and fear and anxiety to come into their body. They never saw it. They're playing a video game. causes people not to buy. So we do know that those visuals work and that the single word primes work. But what happens is most of the subliminal stuff that you see online, or at least that's been sent to me for testing, is actually they use sentences. They'll say like, you feel good about yourself and today's a wonderful day and, be optimistic today. And none of those things actually test out. They don't work. There's no value to it. Or they'll try to do what they'll claim is audio subliminal, to where that there's actually that you can hear audio at a subliminal level. You can't. We've tested those. That doesn't work. None of those work. Nothing works with audio.
Well, actually, I got to ask. I'm sorry. I thought about something real quick. What about playing audio backwards?
Oh, I think it's cool as heck. The Beatles did that.
Yeah, right. But I mean, does it have an effect on the subliminal mind?
No, I wish. That would be pretty cool. No, that would be awesome if it did. It is awfully fun to go and get those things, to look at them and to find them out, to seek them out. I think Black Sabbath did that too when I was a kid.
Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah. Several people have done it, and it's cool because it's fun. Because the artist that does that, I mean, you're gonna go buy the album. It's just another reason that you have to have the album, because you want to hear that thing. Paul is buried, or backwards. I mean, it's just so cool. So it's fun, but it doesn't change what you think. It doesn't turn you into a Satanist. Doesn't turn you into a devil worshiper. Any of those kind of things. I got nothing exciting to report to you there.
Well, and let me ask this too, and because it brings up, I'm bringing this up because of what you just said, and I'm hoping you can clear the air here for many people. A lot of the stuff that you have expertise in, conversational hypnosis, basically, or power of persuasion. Somebody that's uneducated or ignorant, and I'm not saying that in a rude way, might look at that as dark or something evil because you're persuading somebody else. They might look at it as dark magic or alchemy or something like that. And I've noticed that the media today it seems like a lot of these TV shows and movies have a very dark underlying tone. And there's a lot of occultism and mysticism and numerology and symbology, etc., subliminal taglines for future movies and events that take place. I'm wondering if marketing and the abilities that somebody has that knows how to market something with colors and symbols and shapes, etc., and somebody that might call something magic or the occult, which just means the unknown, if they run parallel together almost.
That's really interesting. I think that there's always been a fascination by young people, in that, let's call it 15 to 25. When I was a kid, it was Ouija boards, and today it's zombies. 20 years ago, it was the Golden Dawn and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I think that we were in a very dark era right now. I mean, it took me a while to get used to television shows that were dark. I mean, to where I actually could tolerate them before I even enjoyed them. And I still don't enjoy most of it. But I don't know whether or not it's changing. I mean, everything that we see and do changes us. But just because we watch violence on television doesn't mean we're going to go outside and shoot people. So we know that's true too, which is very interesting. It's surprising that we're almost up to this last year. We were at all-time lows for gun violence in the United States of America, for example, which is kind of interesting after the 90s, which were huge. So there's the correlations between behaviors that could be more violent, perhaps, or anger provoking, and what's on TV. I think we're just in a phase right now where zombies are big, and sort of that because in the 90s and 2000s, remember, it was like the Blair Witch Project and Saw and all that, and it just keeps evolving around. And I think each generation that goes on wants to be a little more deadly and a little more irritating to the prior generation than they were. So whatever the next one is, it'll be just a little stranger and a little weirder. And I sense that'll just keep going. I think that advertisers cater to it because it's profitable. And so clearly, I mean, 10 years ago it was Gothic, 5 years ago it was even Gothic. And there's a lot of, pretty good TV that's out there. That's what is it? I haven't watched it. My son said it was great. Walking Dead. And it's apparently a great show. And I watched the first episode, and I thought, you don't need any one of these zombies for the show to be great. And yet, without the zombies, nobody would watch it.
Right.
So,
right.
So I'm sitting here watching the show, and I'm like, this is a really good show. We just don't need the zombies. So for me, it's like it grosses me out, but everybody else in the room is riveted. And
right.
But yeah, advertisers cater to it, and they want it there, and it works. And you do see a lot of it in ads, even print ads, and it works. And it's online, and it's here for 5 or 6 more years until the next generation of whatever. I don't know how you're going to get more dead than dead, but good point.
Well, and also big companies and corporations out there, they've always got some awesome hidden symbols and sigils in their company logos. You look at Starbucks, they've got the god Isis. There's always pyramids or some type of ancient relic in many of these big Fortune 500 companies. But one thing in particular that stands out in my mind, Kevin, is almost every bank or financial institution has some type of sun symbol that represents the company logo. And I'm wondering if you've ever had a chance to do any research into how symbols affect the conscious and subconscious mind.
Well, they're triggers. So for a lot of people, those triggers matter. So without going into the conspiracy side of it, if I just look at it as from a symbolic side, from like what is it going to do to the behavior of the person who sees it, we know that images change people's behaviors, that change people's decisions. So it is bizarre to look on currency, American currency, and I haven't actually in 5 years, and it's changing as we speak. It's been updated. So a lot of what I say would refer to things 20 years ago for sure, but I don't know about today. But there's a lot of all kinds of the eye on the back and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure, and without getting into the conspiratorial discussion, what the benefit of the currency maker, the United States government, is. What do they think it's accomplishing? I have no idea. Now I do know that symbols change what we think, and so when you have in your logo, especially like you mentioned Starbucks, I think that works to Starbucks' favor because I think it helps capture the more, I don't want to use the word deviant, but I did. But let me pick a different word.
Sure.
The more anti-establishment, let's use that. The more anti-establishment group, people who recognize that magic is magic and it's interesting, but it's not evil, or the occult is not evil necessarily. And so those people, and I think that a lot of that's intentionally done. I think that given all things being equal, they win extra sales by targeting this 7 to 10% of people who are actually in tune with symbols like that actually like symbols like that's sort of part of their belief structure. And they're more likely to do business with that, just like the cross, does a good thing for Christians. The Star of David does a good thing for the Jews. And for sure, whenever somebody's wearing a cross, you feel more comfortable if you're Christian. And if you're Jewish, if somebody's wearing the Star of David, that's home. So I think there's a lot of that with advertising. I don't think it's necessarily harmful, but I think it does bring people in who have been triggered with those symbols elsewhere. I think it captures minds that have been stimulated elsewhere.
Okay. And I want to talk about Minnesota for a minute. I had the opportunity to go out there last year, south of Minneapolis for a couple of weeks. Just great area. I was out in the summertime. Surely enjoyed it out there. Have you been out there for your whole life?
I've been out here for about 30 years. Grew up in Chicago.
Have you noticed the weather, change a lot out there? Minnesota is one of the coldest states in the union. Has it gotten warmer over the years, most recently, let's say the past 10 years?
Oh, yeah, for sure. The last 15 years have been – the 80s were brutally cold and very, very snowy. And right now we're sort of in this fascinating pattern. And I was an anti-climatologist before, but I'm getting more convinced every year that it goes on. We are definitely in one of the warmest winters I've ever experienced up here. It was going to be at 39 again next week. Seriously, I think we were 7 degrees over normal last month. I keep trying to prove this wrong, but it sure looks right to me. Feels warmer. My bills are lower. We do get this variation of like no snow or big snow. And tonight's one of those big snow nights up here. But so I think that we're seeing some of that, at least up here. I can report that global warming is alive and well in Minnesota. Whether it's a problem for the planet, I have no idea.
Well, it's been in the high 70s down here in San Antonio the past couple days, and just beautiful blue skies, no clouds. You said you used to be an anti-climate guy. Did you mean like in reference to you didn't believe in global warming, or you actually studied it and you didn't believe in the mainstream ideals?
There's two groups. There's the meteorologists who are very anti-global warming belief structure, and there's the climatologists who are very pro. And because I get around and I talk to people, I'm very interested in the whole thing. And I talked to geologists, one of the gentlemen I consult up in Alaska, and he's shown me some just very tough to argue with data. Yeah, I was very much, people would say, global warming. And I'm like, don't get too excited. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old, and a million years is a really short period of time. And 20 years is a really, really short period of time. But there's no question that in the last 120 years, when you look at the numbers, at least where I live, we are way above normal, and it's statistically significant. Now, when you look at the NOAA maps, I mean, the same thing is true. I mean, 80% of the globe last year was higher than normal temperature for that area. Now, but the question is, of course, and this is not my expertise, but what I always ask everybody who is I want to know, like, what do you think it means? Like, is it going to continue to get hotter? Does it matter? Is there anything you could do about it? I've talked to some pretty smart people who are not environmentalists, but they're just more pragmatic, and they tell me that it's getting warmer. There's probably nothing you can do about it, no matter how much anybody tries at this point, and nobody has a clue as to what's really going to happen from the geology perspective. So there's a lot of interesting stuff out there. I have no idea what the what's ultimately going to happen. I don't know if it'll continue to get warmer or not, but there's certainly a lot more places that you can take your big ships nowadays than you used to be able to up the Russians. They can get through areas in the is the Bering Strait up there. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like I don't see a big argument. I don't worry about it. My conservative friends don't like that I say that, but the math is the math right now. So I'll wait for more.
Well, and like you said, imagine what it's going to be like 10 years from now if it keeps getting warmer. You know, it's fascinating times we live in, indeed. Kevin, if you would.
Stuff, yeah.
No, what did you say? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, it was really interesting. I was just because when we talk about it, it's like in Minnesota, you know, if you get a little global warming, it's not going to hurt you that bad. But if you're down, we're okay with it up here. But if you're on a shoreline, challenges if some of the scientific things in New Scientist magazine that I read are correct, I'd probably prefer to be where I'm at right now.
Right, absolutely. Now, you talk to people in power all over the world, you know, in different corporate levels and government levels, and you've probably made some really good connections. Do some of the people that you talk to, you know, like CEOs and stuff like that, do they have, you know, what is their take on the current situation of, you know, the planet and where things are going?
My sense is that the idealism that we had in the 60s, for example, and the 50s is kind of gone, and it disappoints me. I've helped a few political candidates with their elections, and as interesting as fun it is, they're really more power-driven individuals as opposed to help the world individuals. And gosh, I hate saying that because everybody I know is going to hear this, but but it's
well, I
true.
appreciate your honesty.
You know, they're not bad people or anything. It's just this is their dream, is to be senator or president. And it's sort of like, you know, when you were a little kid, mom said, you know, so what do you want to be when you grow up? And somebody said president. Somebody said, I want to be a senator. Somebody said, I want to run Apple Computer. And those people really, on average, and this is just my take from the people I've coached and worked with and talked to, people who've hired me, my take is that they're not bad people at all, but they're not idealists. It's not so much the American dream. I think the American dream is painful for people. I think the new American dream is what can we get for free this month? And I think from the corporate level, we're not trying to make the world better. We're trying to focus too much on profit. I mean, profit's important. Without profit, nobody gets paid. But there's also the value to the world of what we do, and we do have the ability to do more for people. And I'm very interested in seeing what people can do that's better, and I am happy to, you know, coach people that I like, at least that I philosophically align with, for their candidacies. But it's disappointing to me, you know, when I listen to Ted Cruz, for example, who I do like very much, is from a philosophical standpoint, say. But you know, it's clear that this is all about his life dream to be president for himself. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. You want to do podcasts, I want to write books, you know, and we both want to be on YouTube. We want people to watch our work. So there's nothing wrong with somebody living their dream. It's just too bad that we don't have that 50s, 60s idealism for whatever it's worth.
Well, you know what, Kevin, and this may sound cheesy, but I want to change the world. I want to make it a better place and help people out for not only our generations, but our future generations. And I think talking to people like you and others that I've had the opportunity to speak with has an impact. If just a few thousand people listen to this podcast over the next couple of weeks, every one of them is going to be able to take something and use it for their benefit and other people's benefits. You know, it really breaks down to who somebody is, and you kind of unlock certain aspects of how to help others if that's who they are, you know, in their soul and their core essence. So this is absolutely incredible stuff. And, you know, if you would, let our listeners know about your website and your YouTube channel if they want to check out your books. I know you got about 22 of them out now, if I'm not mistaken.
It's true. Thank you. Yeah, folks. Every week we've got a e-zine called Coffee with Kevin Hogan. Some people say it's one of the few that they read every week, which is kind of nice. It's got a lot of content about persuasion, influence, sales, marketing, some personal development. Every now and then I comment on the stock markets and the gold markets, things that I get to connect with, the people that people we've been talking about who have a little better information than your average guy on the street. And so, yeah, I put it out there, and it's free. So Coffee with Kevin Hogan is fun. And then kevinhogan.com is where all that stuff is at. And then on YouTube, it's the Kevin Hogan channel. And when you're using influence and persuasion, you can always use it for bad. It's super easy to use anything for bad. It's way easier to do something bad with information than it is something good. But if you really want life to be better, the people around you, the people that hire you, the people that want to love you and care about you, their world's going to be better if you use all the manipulation you can to make their lives better. And I'm always sneaking around doing somebody a dirty trick to make their world better. And I like people to talk behind my back and make sure it's all good. And I hope you guys will feel the same way as people talk about you behind your back. So, yeah, it was a real pleasure to be on here, Rex. I thank you very much for your time today, too. This is a big interview and a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, absolute blessing to speak with you. I know you're going to continue to bring out more information, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity to speak with you again sometime.
That would be awesome. We'll do it. Let's do it 6 months, 9 months down the road and have some more fun.
Yeah, fantastic. Looking forward to it.
Take care, Rex. Goodbye, everybody.
A very special thank you to our guest tonight. For all of you that had the opportunity to be here with us, if you enjoyed the show, follow us on YouTube, youtube.com/clandestine timelord. For the most recent interviews, videos, and podcasts. Or you can check us out on the World Wide Web, www.leakproject.com. Would you like to be a guest on our show? Do you have information that the world needs to see and hear? Send us an email, guestbookings@leakproject.com. Thank you, everybody. This is Rex Bear with Leak Project. Stay safe and be the change you want to see. Good night. This is going to be a lot of fun tonight, folks. We've got guest Kevin Hogan, author of over 20 books and counting, best known for his international selling book, The Psychology of Persuasion, How to Persuade Others to Your Way of Thinking. In the past decade, he has become the body language expert for ABC, Fox, the BBC, the New York Times, the New York Post, and dozens of popular magazines like Forbes, Investors, Business Daily, InTouch. Also, becoming the go-to resource for analyzing key White House figures, Hogan has taught persuasion and influence at the University of St. Thomas Management Center and is a frequent media guest. Articles by and about him have appeared in Success, Redbook, Office Pro, Selling Power, Cosmopolitan, Maxim, Playboy, and numerous other publications. A dynamic, well-known international public speaker, consultant, and corporate trainer, he has trained persuasion, sales, and marketing skills to leaders in the government, employees from Boeing, Microsoft, Starbucks, Cargill, Pillsbury, 3M. The list goes on and on. He recently spoke to the Inner Circle and at the $1 Million Roundtable convention in Las Vegas. His keynotes, seminars, and workshops help companies sell, market, and communicate more effectively. His cutting-edge research into the mind and keen understanding of consumer behavior is unique and is surely going to bring a bounty, a treasure trove of information tonight, folks. If you're in sales, coaching, customer service, if you just have to deal with people in general, the stuff we're going to talk about tonight is going to help you a lot. Some of this stuff people do naturally, but when you really learn how to harness these tools and modules that we're going to discuss, you're going to feel like a mental Jedi. So be prepared, folks. You might listen to this interview several times just to grasp the multiple concepts within this discussion. So this is going to be a real treat. Kevin.
Rex.
Hey, it's a real honor to speak with you. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I really appreciate you spending some time with us tonight. And I know you're a real busy guy, so thanks for coming on the show.
You bet. What's your? Do you also have a YouTube a page as well? A YouTube channel?
Yeah, YouTube channel. You can type in Leak Project or Clandestine Time Lord. It'll come up under either of those. So, yeah.
Good deal. Okay, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going fantastic. Before we get started, I just want to let you know I first discovered your work approximately 11 years ago, 10, 11 years ago. A lot of people that I worked with really enjoyed it as well. So
you did some stuff on the Ancient Aliens. Does that strike a bell, or X-Files type stuff? Is that right?
Oh, yeah. So I've interviewed people that specialize in everything from working with NASA. I've talked to people that used to work with alphabet agencies. I've talked to people that are into some advanced technology, gotten into conspiracy theories. A lot of Ancient Alien stuff too. It's
really interesting. It's always been a interesting subject. I don't know if I would use the word alien or not, or ancient, but it's a good way to categorize it. And the other thing is, about 20 years ago, when I was teaching hypnosis at our school, we had a guy who had a very compelling experience as far as the abduction concept, and I was very skeptical, and I said I want to work with him, and we did some pretty intense hypnosis work, and it all came out legit. It was enough to turn me into a well-intentioned skeptic, as opposed to just being a skeptic.
Can you describe a little bit about the session?
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, it was more than a session. We had the guy come in for our. It was the third day of a training that we were doing, and we actually used almost the whole day doing regression back over and over. Basically, this experience happened up at the Canadian border, and what was most interesting about it was that. When the way that I taught hypnotherapy was, we do almost always regression or parts work. And so the regression type work, we track in massive detail, almost like a lawyer will a case when he's in court. And so just writing down event by event, color by color, what color was this? Where were you at? What table is over there? What's that DNA molecule? Did you see that on television? I mean, we took all these paths down from his experience. And then when I went back and I did it over, it was about 2.5 hours each time we did it. It came out so close to identical. It was basically the same as, what it was like yesterday for you when you shoveled the driveway with snow or whatever. I mean, it was just that. It was that crystal clear. So whenever something like that happens, it's less likely to be a false memory as opposed to the truth. So it was pretty cool. It was a lot of fun, and I'll never forget that. That was a big, long day, and a fascinating experience. A good friend of mine at the time, his name was Craig Lang, who was in MUFON, MUFON, I believe it is. And he brought the guy to me. He's the gentleman that brought the guy to me. And we had a lot of fun. We had about 27, 28 people in the room that day taking notes, and our goal was basically to show how, false memory gets involved in hypnosis, but I couldn't find any. And that's what was really interesting.
Did he describe the beans or the craft?
He did. This was 20 years ago. I'd have to go back into where did we write this up at? We wrote it up somewhere. Craig has it. Craig Lang's got it. He described all that stuff, and I don't remember those kind of details. I just remember being awed by the whole thing.
Wow.
It was pretty cool. Because we did several other things like that. We interviewed several people that had reported experiences like that, and none of them really held up. And of course, we weren't there to knock the person's belief structure, whatever. But this one, gosh. Oh, it's been so long. If I would have been thinking about this, I would have called Craig and asked him the guy's name. But if it becomes interesting to you, email me at the end of a week, like on a Friday, and I'll drop Craig a note. And I'm sure he's got all the data still after all this time.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Now, you have so much expertise and knowledge as well as experience in different persuasion tactics and just getting people to do what you want them to in the right way. 7 magic phrases of persuasion is one of the videos you've got on your YouTube channel. You talk about that, and I'm really hoping we can pick your brain on several topics. But the first thing I'd like to get into, if we could, is invisible persuasion. It's such a powerful tool, persuasion is, and invisible. And when I hear that word, I'm thinking, okay, it's kind of a covert way of doing things. Could you describe that for us, please?
Yeah, sure. There's several aspects of sort of that invisible influence kind of a thing. The first is that there's stuff that's sitting in your living room or your office where you're at right now that changes your decisions all day long. So, for example, there might be a picture of yourself or a mirror in your office, for example. And we know that when people have a picture of themselves or a mirror, like a mirror that's facing them or something on the wall where they actually can catch their eye, that actually changes my behavior. It causes me to be more likely to be disciplined when I'm listening to my client talk to me, because I'm more self-aware of myself as well. So I'll actually listen to him more and pay more attention to my inner feelings. Those are really important things when it comes to influence. I'm a better influencer if I've got the mirror or a photograph of myself looking at myself as if I'm watching me. Similarly, if you have a mirror or happen to have something that's of significance to the other person facing them, like say that there was a mirror behind your desk and the person just happens to look up at themselves, they tend to be more honest. I mean, a lot more honest. People tend to tell you the truth, which can be really helpful, for example, in sales, relationships, with your wife, with your kids, with the kid down the street who put the rock in your window, but you want to know the truth. And when you're talking to people and they have a mirror that they have access to, whether it's, sitting right in front of them, for example, or whether it's off in the distance, if they can see themselves, the probability that they're going to lie or deceive is very, very small. And so these are the kind of things that go into invisible influence, because you wouldn't know that the mirror was there. You wouldn't know that the photograph of yourself was there. You don't even think about it. Like if I just had you close your eyes right now, look around your living room or your office, you would be able to pick out all the major things, but you would be surprised. There's probably 50 things that if you just catalog them as you walk around the room, you wouldn't have known that they were there. There's a paper clip that's on a file. There's a Post-it note. You can ask me about Post-it notes later on. I'll talk to you in detail about that. And these are all triggers for compliance or not on the other person's part. So utilizing cues, little triggers in the environment is really helpful. Another thing that's really cool, using the invisible influence idea, that things that people don't see or pay attention to is that all the time people are processing certain kinds of information. As they're listening to my voice right now, they're going to go, that's interesting, but I'm skeptical. So what might an example be? Well, if I were going to talk with you, I could say, it's really interesting that sometime in the last couple of days, you considered changing the way that you were going to earn money. And that's a really interesting thing. You've also been concerned about your appearance, your physical appearance in some way, and I'm not quite sure. And you also have pondered moving from your current residence in not too distant past, and those kind of things are influencing your current decision. Now, let me ask you a question. Do two of those three things sound like they could be true about you? For example, say that you've pondered just, in the last couple of weeks, that it might be interesting to have revenue coming in, income in some way in addition to what you're doing right now. Is that something that's crossed your mind at all?
Of course.
Okay. So these are common threads. And if you ever study cold reading or go to a professional psychic entertainer, in other words, somebody who's actually almost like a scientist magician, like Penn and Teller, or these guys who are really good, you can actually find that there's about 7 or 8 common themes that run through people's minds every single day, things that they're concerned about and worried about. And the fact is that we know that by simple pacing, pacing being that if I see you cough and I cough, the probability that we're going to be in sync is greater. And there's actually a lot of truth to that too, by the way. It's pretty cool. But when you do it at a much more subtle level, on levels where people are thinking, and then you can replicate verbally what they're actually thinking about or have thought about recently, that's like Milton Erickson squared. I mean, it's really powerful stuff. So being able to mind read another person almost with the cold reading, the ability of a cold reader or almost like psychic phenomena, it makes for a very influential Kevin Hogan or Rex Bear.
Now, so like you said, most people have certain thoughts that they think about every day. And what would another one be?
People tend to think about they tend to think about their